Hi, thanks for sitting for an interview. First question, what's your name and what do you do?
Hey Nick, my name is Christopher Chedeau and I'm working on React Native.
What was your talk on today?
So my talk was on Animated, which is a library to build high-performance animation on React Native. And so the goal of React Native is to implement high-quality mobile applications that are indistinguishable from native apps. And what we found is that animation and gestures are actually like core components of like mobile applications. And so it was really important to build a library for this use case.
I recall from the previous React conference in Europe that a lot of the talks were on animation in general, and there's a lot of excitement around that. And working on this over the last while, what are your thoughts on the state of animation and where that's going?
So animation right now is in like very early stage. So the animated libraries was mostly focused on performance. How do you use React to implement high performance animations? And so in this talk I described like many techniques like shoot component update, element caching, and the strategy I choose to use with React native animated library is data binding, which is a very controversial subject on the front-end libraries. And now, like so I think like we nailed the performance aspect of it, but now we need to focus a lot more on like how to build animations and how to drive those and how to interpolate those. And so animated is one foray into this space, and it mostly focuses about how do you go from one state to another. And there's another animation library called React Motion, which is mostly focused on how do you manage entering and like when a component mounts and unmounts, which is like a very hard problem in React. And so what I really want to see in the future is being able to merge those two libraries into one and being able to get like a very fast animation and that works with entering and exiting. But also like I think we're still like 1% finished. Like we still have a lot of things to explore, and I highly recommend people to try and build like animation and see like what patterns they emerge out of it and like make it better.
Are there any unique challenges for animation across platform, across iOS and Android and maybe other platforms that are different than just building up the UI?
Yeah, so I think like most of the challenges are around what are the tools in order to implement those high performance animations. So the normal way you implement animations, like the easiest way is to, on every request animation frame, you drive the animation by JavaScript. But one of the big issues with this is that if there's anything else running at the same time in JavaScript, or if like a HTTP request comes in, or you pass a JSON payload, or you do something, then it's going to be on the same thread as the animation, and it's going to stutter. And so with animated, one of the things I wanted to do is to make the API being able to be offloaded to a different thread. And so by doing this, then we're able to, on React Native, run the animation on the main thread. Or one of the interesting things about animation in iOS is that they actually put the animation in a completely different process using core animation. And in order to isolate all of the application from the animation running. And so this is like something I really want to explore in the React world.
All right. In general, a question I had yesterday for someone was, what are the possible future opportunities to build omnichannel applications with React Native, where you might target iOS, Android, web mobile, and maybe even a web application with a single code base?
So the goal of React Native is to give like some small set of components that work exactly the same, like pixel perfect the same on all the platforms. And so those components are going to be text, image, view, maybe scroll view, maybe text input. And so if you use those components to build your app on iOS, then they're going to work exactly the same on Android. and when we open source it. And one of the things I want to do is also make them work exactly the same on the web. And so those components have been designed to be polyfill on the web, because like they're using like inline style and flexbox. So given enough work, like they should be able to run there. And so, but now this is only one part. And now you also want to be able to use any native components. So for example, if you want the iOS navigation, you should be able to use it. And so over time, I think the way it's going to go is we're going to write more and more in JavaScript and more in pure React Native. And this way, like, it's going to be cross-platform. But in the short term, like, we really want the ability to be able to use like those native components, because otherwise, like, you're limited to the same characteristic as the web view.
And just as a sort of follow-on to that, what's the current status on React Native for Android?
So React Native for Android is going to come up in a few weeks, or maybe 1 or 2 digit months. But like, we're working on it, and you can see progress on the React Native GitHub. We're starting to add documentation of what props and what components work on iOS and work on Android. And like, we're like 2 weeks ago, we got it to compile on the open source setup. So like, we're really close, but we still need to like make sure that the documentation is good, like all of the like core components are exported and things like this. So it's only a matter of time. But I really want to make sure that you remember that when we are going to open source it, it's going to be like still very early. And like, the Android version right now is still lagging a few months behind iOS. So don't say like, oh, we're going to open source, like stop everything you're doing and like use it in production right now. So it's going to happen. Like, we are fully dedicated to it, we're fully staffed, but it's going to take some time.
All right, and last question. A couple of months have passed since we talked last, I guess. In general, what do you see as happening in JavaScript and React in the next year or two?
Yeah. So I think like the big focus on the next year is going to be about tooling. Because one of the things that we realized with trying to convert people from iOS and Android development to JavaScript and React Native is that their IDE is actually really good. Like Xcode and Eclipse and all of those IDEs, like they give you autocomplete. They give you like a description. They give you reformatting tools. And so we don't have any of this stuff in the JavaScript landscape right now. And so Microsoft, with the latest version of their Visual Studio Editor, like, is doing a really, really good job at doing this for JavaScript. But I think we need more than this. And so at Facebook, we're going to work on, we're working on Nuclide, which is like our IDE for React Native and JavaScript on top of Atom Editor. And we also want to integrate with Flow, because Flow gives us type annotation, but it can also give like jump to symbol. It can also give description, like type ahead and autocomplete and things like this. And then we're also investing in like DevTools. So like, we released a new DevTool and we want to integrate like more things into it. So right now it's just for elements, but one thing we can get is with the recent open sourcing of React and Relay and GraphQL, like, we should be able to get the Relay query editor, the GraphQL query editor inside of the DevTools. And we want to get like all the performance, benchmark, and monitoring inside of the DevTools. And we want to embed the DevTool inside of your IDE. And in your IDE, we want to get like the best JavaScript experience possible. So I think like this is, at least at Facebook, where we want to push everyone towards. And the way I think it's going to happen is we need to give a space for people to implement the tools, and then they're going to do it. But right now, there is no space to do that. You need to create a Chrome extension, but like now it's hard to distribute and things like this. So this is where I see like where I want to push the community towards.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That was very helpful.